בסיס ואנחנו נשמעים אדוני אלוהינו חזקי אינו קור ורבובו ואנחנו קמנו בסדר אדוני נשיר המלך יעננו ויהיה דברנו. Okay, so using this sefer, the line of Rabbi Majeski. We are on page 191. One 91. Good morning. So the Medrash wrote a mashal of a king that comes into a country with 3 of his officers, and the people in the country, each and every one of them, it's about who they're going to choose to connect to. Once of them connected to one, once of them connected to the other, once of them connected to the third. And there was one individual who was very smart, and he said, I'm not connecting to any of the officers, I'm going to connect to the king himself. Because the officers can be replaced. But the king, he's the king. He's there permanently. So too, the nations of the world, one chooses the sun, one worships the moon, there are those that worship the stars and the constellations, and the Yidden say, we just choose Hashem. He's the king. So in the Maimon, the Rebbe asks 2 questions. One question is that it says the person who chooses the king is like very smart. He's superior to everyone else in intelligence. And that's why he realizes to choose the king. The Rebbe says, you don't need to be super smart for that. Even a child knows that the king is greater than everybody else. And the reason that he gives is also unnecessary. The reason is because they all can be replaced and the king not. Has nothing to do with being replaced. A king is higher than everyone else. So yesterday we did this last piece a little bit faster. Let me chew it over a little bit. And that is, a king is higher than the others, not just because he has a higher position, but a true king is someone that in terms of his ability, in terms of his talent, in terms of his true greatness, he's much greater than everyone else, even greater than all the officers and all the people who are even on a high spiritual plane. So this is based on a pasuk. It's a pasuk where it says in reference to Shol HaMelech, Mishichmai Olamayla Gavaya Mikolam, from his shoulders and above, he was higher than everyone else. We said yesterday, literally, it means that he was taller than everybody else. He was so tall that everybody else's head reached his shoulders. But the deeper meaning is that he was so high spiritually that the shoulders, which represent midas, because the right shoulder leads to the right hand, that's chesed. The left shoulder is to the left hand, that's gevura. And chesed and gevura, these are the 2 midas that are the root of all other midas. So the midas of the king are higher than the seichel of everyone else. So which on the surface is a little bit difficult to understand because Seichel is higher than Midas. So we explained yesterday to use the muscle of, let's say, a human and an animal. Humans are higher than animals. But not only in general humans are higher than animals, even though animals have intellect, have a certain degree of intellect, but nevertheless, the midas of a human being are higher than the intellect of an animal. What does higher mean? I'm not talking about higher spiritually closer to Hashem. I mean higher means, say, it's about much higher, greater spiritual substance than in the spiritual energy than compared to the intellect of an animal. Because the intellect of an animal isn't really true intellect. I don't know if we ever had the discussion before. What is the difference between the intellect of an animal and a human? Is it just a difference in quantity, that a human has more intellect and the animal has less, or is it a different kind of an intellect?
The animal's intellect is only from its midos, like its instincts that are like intellectual come from its midos.
What does that mean?
Like because it's hungry, it's gonna be clever to like get the food or
right. So we must have spoken about this, I think, in Tavshan Daled, in that Maimer, that animals are primarily midos, they're emotion. Even the intellect that we see is an extension of their emotional issues, which means we're going to see in animals' intelligence that they are smart how to capture another animal. They're smart how to run away from a hunter. If you put food down somewhere, they're smart in figuring out how to get the food, how to escape from a trap. In other words, it's always intellect in connection to something emotional. We don't find by animals the ability to sit down and just think intellectually independent of emotion, just intellectual thought process, because an animal is not capable of doing that. So therefore, an animal, even the intellect of an animal is more instinct than anything else. Even the little bit of intellect, it's an extension, it's a branch almost of the animalistic instincts and emotions. And by human, intellect is something which is pure, independent intellect. So the intellect of a human has more quality to it than the emotions of a human have more quality to it than the intellect of an animal. Why is he saying all this? So therefore we can understand that the Melech is a person of much greater spiritual quality than everybody else. So then what do you need to give a reason? But the others could be replaced, has nothing to do with being replaced. The king, in essence, is just a much greater quality than everybody else. Now we go to the answer. Page 193. The Chayr of Shilavaraz, in this Maimer, the Rebbe gives an answer. After the Rebbe gives an answer, the Rebbe says it's not good enough. He gives another answer, a deeper answer. After he gives a deeper answer, he says it's not good enough. He gives a deeper answer. And this goes on and on for quite a few levels. Each level, deeper understanding of the subject than the one before. And we'll see as we go along. So that's why it starts off. On the surface, the above can be explained based on that which is known. In the early generations, those who worshipped idols, there was somebody by the name of Enosh. He was the first person to worship idols. And then people began to worship idols. So in the early generations, people who worship idols, Yadu, they knew Shashefa Shanishpa Ba'aretz, that all the hashpa, all the sustenance that comes here on earth, it comes from the stars and the constellations, like it says in the pasuk, Mimeget Hu Shemesh, Mimeget Geresh Yirachim. It says the crops that the sun yields or the crop that the moon yields. So there are certain things that grow that are affected by the sun and the moon. They knew that it's not that the sun itself has the power to give this sustenance, or the moon. And the Shakadosh Baruch Hu mashpia al yadam. They knew that Hashem is the one who is in charge, and He gives hashpah through them. So what was the mistake? Why do they worship these idols? The sun, the moon, and the constellations. And the Shato, the Chashvu, they made the mistake, and they thought Shashem Pashnishpa Mimenu Yisbarach Adeke Chavim Azoles Ubebchirasim. That this sustenance that Hashem gives the world through them comes, and it's happening through their choice. In other words, they have the choice whether to transmit this sustenance or not. But the Yados Emes, they didn't know the truth. Shehem Ein Le Bechira Klal. But because they thought that they have the choice, so therefore they bowed down to them, they worshiped them, and they thanked them for what they were doing. But they didn't know that it's not true. They have absolutely no choice. They're only like an axe in the hands of the chopper. So this is one of the terms we're going to be coming up with. So I think I gave this out yesterday. Whoever didn't get it can get it now. These are a list of this is the sheets we're going to be using as we go along, pointing out different Hasidic terms.
Yes.
Yep. Whoever didn't get it can get it now. So this is actually the first one on all the terms, page 40. If you look in the book, this little booklet on page 40. The garden b'yad ha'chaytzim. It means like an axe in the hands of the chopper. So just like a person takes an axe and chops wood and does all the work that he does, you don't give any credit to the axe, you give the credit to the person who's chopping it. That's how the sun, the moon, the constellations, they have influence on this world. And there are people who could see that connection, and we also believe in such a thing that we know the sun makes things warm, the sun makes things grow, the moon does certain things, as the Rebbe just brought a pasuk in Chumash. But they have no choice. They're like the axe in the hand of a chopper, which would mean any other mashal a little bit closer to us, a little bit something more relevant to us, would be like taking a pen and writing something, writing a beautiful story, a beautiful novel, a beautiful poem, or anything, or just beautiful writing like a Sefer Torah, writing the letters beautifully. It's not the pen that gets any credit, but the scribe, because the tool that you're using has absolutely no free choice. So the stars, the moon, the sun, they all are only tools in Hashem's hands. But they didn't know that. They thought that they have some sort of a ability to make a choice. Good morning, Leah.
Good morning, Rabbi Majeski. I know I'm late second day. I'll just listen.
One more day and it'll be 3 days.
Tomorrow is going to be better. Without a show. It's a Shvat process.
Okay. we make the Hashgacha practice, yeah. Page 195. Kilafita Usam, according to their mistaken perception that the hashpah, that the sustenance that comes to us is with their free will. So we have to thank them for that. This is another term you should make note of. It's number 2 on the list on page 40. It's a term that comes up in this mimer, comes up in many maimorim, and the words mean the wine belongs to the owner, but the waiter gets the thank you. If you're in a restaurant and the waiter brings something to the table, you say thank you. Why saying thank you? It's not his store. It's not his food. He's just the waiter. You still say thank you. Why do you say thank you? Because the waiter does have some input. He brings it to you. He can bring it nice, or he can have all the soup spill on you. He can bring it sooner. He can bring it later. He can put it down nicely. He can say it with a smile. The waiter is not the owner of the company, not the owner of the restaurant. He's putting it down on the table. He has some input. So therefore, if he has some input, you should say thank you for his little input. The same thing is the way they looked at the Kechavim Azovis, that Hashem is running the show and Hashem is the one who's in charge, but he's doing it through them, and they have some choice and they have some input, at least like the waiter who has the input to bring food down to the table. And therefore, they deserve to be thanked. And not only that, what do you think in your head, if I'm going to be nice to the waiter, what's going to happen? He'll be nicer to me. He'll bring me the food sooner. He'll make sure to get me a bigger portion, whatever it is that I can benefit from the waiter. If I'm nice to him, I'll benefit from him. He'll be nicer to me. That's the next page, 196. So first of all, they worship means they said thank you because they felt that they deserve a thank you. I mean, think of it the way it's begashmis. Why do we say thank you to a person that does something nice to me? Everything's from Hashem. Everything's Hashgacha Pratis. So if this person is being nice to me and does me a favor, I have to say thank you to Hashem. Why thank you to the person? And we surely say thank you to Hashem. Why to the person? The answer is because this person has free choice. He could have chosen to do it or not do it, and he chose to do it. But isn't Hashem in charge? Yes. If this person wouldn't have done it, Hashem would have found another way of doing it. But the fact that they did it is because they chose to do something nice to me. For that choosing, I think that they deserve it. Thank you. So they believe that the stars, the moons, and the constellations chose to give this sustenance, and therefore they deserve a thank you. So that's number one. Number two, not only a thank you, but gam lefitusam, according to their mistaken perception that the kechov and the mazolas and balabchira have free choice. Chashvu, they also thought if they worship them, they'll give them more sustenance. So that means that they actually felt that they have a certain degree of authority to do things on their own. So if I worship the sun will give me more warmth or more bracha, whatever it is that I need. But they still believe that it's really ultimately from Hashem, but because the sun is in the middle and the sun has a free choice, it can do something for me. I mean, think of it when you go to a government agency and you need something from them. So of course, you know that the person you're dealing with has a little bit of a decision to make. This person is their choice. They could be nice to me, they could be not nice, they could demand of me to bring, you come into the country, you go through immigration. You can have an easy time, you can have a hard time. Not because the United States government, the person standing in the airport, allowing people to come into the country, if he had a bad morning and he didn't get his coffee yet and he's in a bad mood, he'll be nasty to you. And if he's in a good mood, he'll be nice to you. And that can make a difference. So being nice to that person means I'll get more hashpah. And that's the way they felt about the Kechavim Azolos, that they're going to get more hashpah. They worship them. This is Avodah Zarah, because they don't have any free choice. They're just like a tool. But this is a more subtle kind of Avodah Zarah. There's worse than that. What's worse than that? This led to even a greater mistake. The greater mistake is that they thought which means that Hashem abandoned the world and left the world into the hands of the stars and the constellations, which means that the way that the world runs is dependent only on them. Which means not that they are like this waiter who has some input, but Hashem created the world. Then he gave it over to the stars, the moon, the constellations. They should run everything. And Hashem is not involved anymore. They're in charge. For example, a king, that he appoints people to be ministers, and they're supposed to run the country. הגם שזה שבכך להנהגת המדינה, ומפני שהמלך מינו ישם על זה, even though the fact that they have the authority to do this is because the king appointed them, but nevertheless, after the king appointed them, who runs the country? They run the country. Hanagas Hamedina, they are sorry. The king doesn't really get involved. And we don't have kings today, but I guess in our system, think of it this way. You have the United States government, and you have the government is in Washington, D.C., but every state has a governor. So what's supposed to happen? Before the governor does something, he's supposed to check with the president of the United States of America if he could do it in his state or not. Every governor in every state has to call up the president before, should I do this or not? That's not what I put you there for. I put you there because you have brains yourself and you know how to run a state. You're in charge. If it's something very big, call me or get in touch with the higher authorities and we'll make a decision. But generally, you have to run it yourself. In other words, not only it's okay for them to run it themselves, that's why I put the governor in charge to run it himself. And each city has a mayor who's in charge. What is the mayor supposed to do? He's supposed to call the governor, hello, should I pick up my right hand or not? And the governor calls up the president, should I pick up my right hand or not? Each person is put in charge that they should make the decisions independently, as long as it doesn't contradict the general policy of the country. So that's saying that Hashem basically says, I'm giving it over to you. And I'm not involved now. The Eibishter is busy with busier things, with heavenly things. And this world, the Gashmitic world especially, he gave over to the stars, the constellations, the sun, the moon. They should run everything. So you see the difference between the first Avodah Zarah and the second. The first Avodah Zarah says Hashem is in charge. And the stars and the moons have a little bit of free choice, a little bit of an input, like the waiter. The second opinion says that Hashem is not involved at all. He just lets these forces be involved. And Hashem is sort of out of the picture, except if it's something big, then Hashem gets involved. So that's it's worse Avodah Zarah, because this is denying even more Hashem's involvement in the world. Now the Gemara says,
Which reference was the first one? Was it like the one?
The waiter.
One was the waiter, and one was the axe chopper?
No, the axe, that's the true Amunah.
Fine.
That everything in the world is just a tool, and Hashem runs everything. That's the emes. What is not correct is to say that it's like the waiter, and what's worse than that is to say that Hashem abandoned it and delegated authority to others to run the world.
Rabbi Majeski, where would Paro fit into this? Like, could you fall into either one of these two categories?
We what?
Paro, like, what was his belief? Because he knew that God existed, but didn't believe that he had power. Would he fall into like the second category more, or something different?
He belonged to the second category. Yep. So there's a term that's used in Gemara. I think you should look this up also. Take these booklets and take a look. You'll find both terms there in Tanakh. One is on page 20 and one is on page 21. Page 20 on the bottom is Ishayahu. He says to the people, Hayispor Hagarzan ala chitzav. Can a hatchet is another word for axe. Glory over the one who chops with it. In other words, will the axe take credit over the person who chops the wood with the axe? Of course not. So this is where this term comes from, and this mashal comes from. Garzan means an axe, and chitzav means the chopper. On the next page, page 21, look at the top of the page and at the bottom of the page. top of the pages, and he said to me, did you see what men are like? How of Israel do in the darkness, each man in his paved rooms. For they say Hashem does not see, Hashem has forsaken the land. These are the words, Ozav Hashem Asaris, Hashem abandoned the world, which means he's busy with something else, and he left the world over for the stars and the constellations to run the world. Okay. Now in the Gemara, there's a term which is Elokah Delakaya. Look at the terms again on page 40. This is number 3. Also a very common term brought down, but it's the source is Gemara. It means that not they say Hashem doesn't exist, they say Hashem is the God of all gods. In other words, they believe that there are different gods. But Hashem, he's the God of all the gods. He created all the gods, he's in charge of all the gods, but they're all different gods.
So why they would want to hold something that is not the God of the God? Like he's the most powerful, so we don't believe in it. Why we would not go straight to him?
Why they don't want to go straight to him? That's what the Maimon is soon going to talk about. He's soon going to talk about that. Yeshleimar, Dezeh, Shomeselim, Kairim, Oysa, Yizbarach, B'Shem, Elokah Delakaya. It says in Gemara that the Goyim call Hashem the God of all gods. This includes both of the categories we just learned about. Even those people that they say that Hashem abandoned the world in the hands of the Kachav Mazos, completely gave it over to the stars and the moon, they should run the world, it's also Elokah Delakaya. Why? First of all, they agree that Hashem is greater than all the gods. That's why they call him the God of all the gods. He's greater than them and he rules over them. Even according to their distorted perception that these other forces are gods, they believe that they have the authority to do what they want in the earth and to do whatever it is to sustain it. They also agree that the authority that they have is not because of their own ability, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu Naslam Koyach Hazeh. Hashem is the one who gave them that authority. B'dugma Sari HaMelech, just like the ministers of the king, that they run the country with their own understanding, with their own choices, with their own intelligence. But nevertheless, why do they run the country? They agree and they acknowledge. So even those people that say Hashem abandoned the world and gave it over to Kechov Mazalas, they also agree that Hashem is the God of all gods. So which means that he is the one who gave them the authority. He is the one who created them. But at the end of the day, he said, okay, now you take over. I'm busy with something else. And that's why it's Avodah Zarah. Yeah.
What about the example of the kind of feel like diamonds before he like steals? Is that what category is he falling in?
We'll get there, because that could be a person who believes in Hashem 100%. So that's a category of a person that believes in Hashem and believes in the emes, but the emunah that he has gets stuck over here, and doesn't go down, doesn't affect his hands and feet. That's what happens.
But it could still be real to him.
Yeah.
It's just something real.
Right. In other words, in a subtle way, he's really not recognizing Hashem runs the world. But in reality, if you ask him, he'll say, of course I believe in Hashem. That's why I'm davening to him. So definitely that's with that opinion. The second opinion that they say, Hashem is in charge. He's running the world. We're not saying that he abandoned the world. It just, the stars and the sun and the moon, they have a little bit of an input, a little bit of a choice. The second mistake. That's also, in a little subtle way, it's also called Elokah. That the fact that they're saying that also means they're considering them gods. The mere fact that they say that they have any ability to make any kind of decision according to their will, whether to give or not to give, that alone is already Elokah. They're saying that they have authority, and that's Avodah Zarah. So basically, one would think, no, that's not avodah zarah. In fact, by the way, there are people that might think along this way, they don't even realize that they're thinking that way. They'll say Hashem is in charge, but different things happen because of nature. What does that mean, if you think of it? Hashem created a system. The system is called nature. And things run with the system. And that system makes this person do this, makes this happen to another person. It's not, they don't believe that every detail is Hashgacha Pratis. Could you imagine such a person? He's from, believes in Hashem. If you ask him, did Hashem create the world? Yes. Is Hashem in charge? Yes. Is the wind that's blowing now and the fact that I just lost $10 because the wind blew it away, is that from Hashem? No, that's nature. There's a wind blowing. Your $10 bill, you left it open on the table, so the wind blew it away. Why does that have to do with Hashem? It's nature. And so everything else is there things that are, in a certain way, they're saying that nature has, except they're not saying nature has a will. Nature doesn't have any consciousness. But really, in a certain sense, they're saying Hashem is not in charge of everything. This is much worse, because here you're attributing it to a power, that this power makes choices. I'm going to give it to you, I'm not going to give it to you. And that's avodah zarah. So what is true Amunah? Page 199. So what negates not believing in other gods at all completely? For that you have to know all the intermediates through which Hashem makes things happen, whether it's the sun, whether it's the moon, whether it's the constellation, whether it's the wind, whether it's nature, everything. They're all just like an axe, they're just a tool in Hashem's hand. Now we can explain, we can understand in a deeper way what is the chachma, what's the wisdom here of this person that says, I'm going to choose the king. The fact that the Yid knows the truth and he looks at the whole system of how things happen, how we get sustenance. And no matter what he sees, he recognizes that it's all Hashem. Is because of their great understanding, because they see things, they see the truth, how it is really internally. Outwardly, it doesn't look like that. Outwardly, the way it looks, it looks like this is coming from the sun, this is coming from the moon, these things are coming from the constellations, this is because of the wind, this is because of the rain, this is because of the snow. Everything, there's a reason why it's happening. They look at different things that have a certain quality, and because of that, they're deserving to be Hashem's intermediaries, and therefore they have the power to do it. Page 202. So the fact that you didn't know the emes, that all these forces, the sun, the moon, they're so powerful, the stars, all these things are only a tool in Hashem's hand, it comes from the great knowledge that they could see through and not be deceived by the way things appear to be on the outside. Last week, we in the parsha we read about the mun. So it's interesting that, I don't know if you're aware of this, that the bracha that we say for Birchas Hamazon, the first bracha, we finish with the words, Baruch Atah Hashem Mazonos HaKol. Who wrote it? Who composed those words?
Moshe?
Yeah. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it. And this was the bracha they made on the mun. That's it, just this bracha. The next bracha, Neida Lecha, that's all about going into Eretz Yisrael. That was written by Yoshua. The third bracha, that was written by David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech. But the first one was by Moshe Rabbeinu. So the question is, if this is a bracha that you make on the man, why do we make this bracha? This is a regular food.
It still comes from Hashem.
What does it mean regular food?
What?
I said, what does it mean regular?
It comes from the earth, it doesn't come from the heaven. So this is the answer. The reason why we make the same bracha that we made on the man, because we believe, and this is to recognize that the food that comes from the earth, it grows out of the ground, or it grows on a tree, or anything else, in essence is no different than the man. It's coming from Hashem. The fact that I have money at the end of the week to buy food looks like the money comes from my employer. The money comes from something that I sold and I did business. No, it's all man from Hashem, and all these things are only channels through which Hashem is doing it to camouflage that He's giving it to me. But in essence, we're getting food just like the man, so it makes sense to make the bracha on the man.
Just like Rabbi Zusha, he used to daven to Hashem for every single bite of soup before it came to his mouth.
Right, because you saw that every single bite of food is coming from Hashem. So therefore, why is he saying this? Therefore, you need the wisdom that even though it's so clear to you that it's coming from here, it's coming from there, to recognize that it's really coming from Hashem. Like I said, we, Baruch Hashem, we're not talking about Avodah Zarah, but we make this sort of subtle mistake with nature. That this is because of the doctor, this is because of the lawyer, and this is the shadchan made a mistake. They shouldn't have said this, they should have said that. And this is, I made a mistake, I shouldn't have done this, and everything is someone there to blame. Not realizing that the Eibishter is running the show. So in a sense, it's so clear that this happened because of that. If you wouldn't have done this, it wouldn't have happened. No, there's something higher that's making. So that's what he's saying. That's why it says pikach, because on the surface, it looks like the sun is really making things happening. It looks like the moon is making things happening. It looks like the stars are making things happen. You look at the stars and you can see something about the future, and that's exactly what happens. So it looks like they are in charge. And the fact that I'm able to see through it and say, no, it's all Hashem, that takes wisdom. Got it? Okay. Now the Rebbe is going to explain that this couldn't be the answer. It's got to be deeper than that. Page 204. Being that the Medrash brings a mashal of a king and ministers. In the mashal, the ministers do have free choice. They do have the choice to make things the way they understand, to do things the way they feel and the way they understand. So that could be a reason why it does make sense. Now, for example, you asked the question, why not go to the king who's the highest? But you see that if I have a certain person in government that's in charge of a certain department, I'm going to go to that person because he's smaller. It's easier to have a connection to him. I become close to that person. And then I ask him, do me a favor. He's in charge of the agricultural department. I have a field. I need a favor. So I talk to him. It's going to happen quicker than if I go want to speak to the president of the United States or the king of the whole country. So therefore, these people said, I'm going to choose this minister because he's more helpful in what I need. I'm going to choose that minister. He's more helpful in what I need. I'm going to choose a third minister. And not the king, not because they don't recognize the greatness of the king, they're going to get more benefit from the minister than from a relationship with the king. Because the king is too high up. It's not going to connect so much to what they need as individuals. So the Rebbe is saying, so the mashal and the nimshal are not really the same. Because in the case of the king and the ministers, they have free choice. They do have free choice. But when you talk about the moon and the stars, they have no choice. So there's something missing here. Now let's just sleep on it. And tomorrow we'll continue Mirz Hashem.
Rabbi Majeski, there was like those people כאילו זה לא ראש ממשלה, government, זה השם, כאילו זה אלוקים.
כן.
So it doesn't make sense because Elohim is not moving. Elohim is the one that created everything. So like, I don't know.
Like what?
Like why would they believe in stars and the moon if the one that created the stars and the moon? Yeah, I get it. Like they want to like get benefit, but Hashem created everything, so it's like more smart to go to him. It's not he's unlimited.
No, so they feel that he's too far away. If you think of the mushroom, the gashmis, when you need something, a government person, the person who's in charge of the whole country, not so much involved in this more details of what's going on. Right, Hashem is like the big one in charge. And then he made him in charge of little things. So therefore, if I really need something, I'll get more from my relationship with them than my relationship with
And people actually get something from the stars.
That's what we're doing.